What's going on, everyone? So, the Atlanta Hawks were just sent packing by the Chicago Bulls on the back of Kobe White, who dropped a career-high 42. DeMar DeRozan was incredible. I mean, that team in general was very good. They were pretty much in control and dominated that game start to finish. They were up 18 at the end of the first. Atlanta kind of made a push. They got it to as close to 2, but were never able to actually get over the hump. And then every time Chicago just had an answer and eventually pushed it away again. And that was it. That was all she wrote. Atlanta, just not a good basketball team. They're going to end up blowing it up in the offseason. They have to. The DeJounte experiment, it doesn't work. It's not working. They've tried to make it work for years now. They were trying to trade DeJounte. Look at multiple times like DeJounte was going to get traded. Lakers at one point were the front runners, but they didn't want to trade Austin Reeves. So it's time to move off of them, right? Question is, do you trade DeJounte or do you trade Trae Young? Now, I have said that I think it is in the best interest of Atlanta to trade Trae. I know some Atlanta people might not like that. I know some people might even go, well, of course because you're a Laker fan. I have said repeatedly, I don't really want Trae on the Lakers. The reason I think that you should trade Trae Young is because I think, A, you'll get a much bigger return for Trae because of his age and his name. You get a bigger package return than you would for DeJounte. And I think that DeJounte works fine with this team, with this roster. I think you need a couple more complementary pieces for him. But I think this roster, DeJounte does a lot of the same things. And, the ability to drive and kick and having the shooters around him and stuff like that. I think you could get a nice package for Trae, have DeJounte Murray be your primary on-ball player and your point guard. Go get, maybe even with the pieces that you get, to go get that complimentary star alongside DeJounte, where DeJounte could still play the point guard and be the point guard, but now you got somebody that makes a little sense other than Trae. The issue is they need the ball in their hands to be effective. And neither of them are good enough to play off ball, which is why I don't really want Trae on the Lakers with LeBron James, because LeBron's going to have the ball in his hands heavily, and I don't know how the fit is. Plus, Trae is a liability on the defensive side. And look, Trae was dealing with an injury, so I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt on the offensive side of things today. DeJounte Murray was just spectacular in this game and was single-handedly doing everything he could to keep them afloat. But it just, a lot of times it was just 5-on-1 with him, and he couldn't keep up. And so, DeJounte, he was great in this game. Trae, again, his ability to make plays is spectacular. I mean, he's such a gifted playmaker. But when he can't score efficiently, he's a liability. He can't defend anybody. He gambles too much. He makes just silly decisions on the defensive side. It's just, I'm not super, I like Trae. I think he's a good player. I think he is, when he's on, he is up there with the best of them at times. But he's also a guy that if you've watched enough games and you've watched enough Trae, he can also just shoot you out of a game entirely. He's a guy that can, he can completely take over and win you a game. He can do the same thing and completely cost you a game. So, I don't know. I think DeJounte Murray makes a little more sense for them. I think you trade Trae Young in the offseason, you keep this team intact, and you really make a push to try to be more competitive next year. It's kind of my thoughts. And I mean, even just breaking down the box scores here. I mean, again, DeJounte Murray had 30 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, 11 of 21 from the field, 3 of 6 from 3, 2 steals, only 1 turnover. I mean, pretty much everybody on the team was a minus. And DeJounte was a -6. Outside of everyone else, Trae Young was a -27. Right? And look, I've talked heavily. I think a lot of people just throw out plus minus because they don't understand a lot of what goes into plus minus. So they just think he was a -27. There's a lot of factors that go into that, who's on the court with you, the type of runs, things like that. So to me, it was okay, Trae, he had his struggles, but what else could he do to impact? I mean, turn the ball over heavily, right? The problem is he's just such high usage and needs the ball in his hands constantly. And I don't think that that's a win. I've even talked about Luka. Can Luka win a championship with the way and the style in which he plays? Because he is so ball dominant. He is so on ball. You need a very specific team alongside him. There are times where Luka and Kyrie look terrible as a duo. There's times where they look great, but there were times where DeJounte Murray and Trae Young looked great. Right? It just depends. And I mean, Trae Young, he had 22 points and 10 assists, but 11 of those points, so he only really had 11 points. The other 11 came from the foul line. Right? He was 4 of 12 from the field, 3 of 8 from 3. So it's just, again, it's just this struggle. Right? I just don't think the two pieces match, and I just think it's time for Atlanta to tear it down and kind of restructure. Right? Trade. If I'm Atlanta, I take a year. I trade everybody I could trade except for DeJounte Murray. Right? Just tear it all down. Tear it down to the studs. Right? Keep DeJounte. Or if you want, you even trade DeJounte. Trade them both. But I think you keep DeJounte. Try to get off of Capella, get off of Brogdon. You get as many assets as you can. You tell DeJounte, hey, I need a year, right? It sucks. I know. I need a year. We're going to build this team around you. This is going to be your team. We're going to hand you the keys. And you use all the assets you acquire, right? And you just start piecing this together. You go get the complementary right pieces around these guys, or around DeJounte. And you make that push, in a year or so. I mean, if you can do it in the offseason, then do it in the offseason, right? Maybe go get a Royce O'Neal for the two guard, right? Let's say the Lakers do end up trading for Trae, right? And they give up Reeves and Rui, right? Maybe you go Rui at the 4, Murphy, getting DeJounte and Royce. I don't know. It's just, I'd really have to break it down, see who's available in the offseason, what pieces make sense. It's tough. But if you can piece it together this offseason, then fine. But I think realistically, it's probably going to take you about a year, right? So I think you just trade everybody, tell DeJounte, hey, give us a year. We'll get this worked out, and then you're off to the races. But from Chicago's standpoint, look, if Jimmy Butler can't go, I just don't see Miami beating Chicago. So more likely than not, Chicago's going to beat Miami, and then you got a Chicago-Boston. My problem is Chicago, I just don't think that they have the firepower to keep up with Boston. I think Chicago wins a game. Right? I really wanted Miami to play Boston because Miami's just been in their head. And it's just really caused problems for Boston. There's been a lot with that, but it's just, I don't know. I don't necessarily believe in Chicago to handle business, right? I just think Chicago just kind of gets ran through in that series. Right? I mean, if they had Zach LaVine and it worked, right? There were times where Zach LaVine looked like he worked. I think that would help. I still don't think that they beat Boston, but I just think Zach LaVine, he's a high-volume scorer. He's a guy that could, when he's on, he can score with the best of them. I think you could have a game where, maybe he goes and drops 30, DeMar drops 30, and you win. Right? And then you have that other game where Boston just loves to beat themselves, and they lose a game, and now you're in a game 6 maybe, right? It's kind of how I look at it in that regard, but I don't know, Alex Caruso also, you're going to need him, right? If he's okay, he has a significant foot sprain based on the report that came out after the game. Hopefully he can get right before that Boston series, but it's just I don't know. I do like Vu, the Vu matchup against Porzingis, and then also bringing Andre Drummond. There's moments where Chicago looks okay, I think they can make some noise, but I just think game in and game out, I think that Boston just kind of runs through them. I hope not. I love a good competitive series. I'd love a series where, Chicago pushes them to 6 or 7. That would be great. But I just think they're going to be a little in over their head. See what happens with Jimmy. We'll get some more information. If Jimmy's good to go, I think Miami can beat Chicago. And then but even then, it's how good is Jimmy? Right? Because if he's not 100%, I just don't see. If he's just if he does have an MCL thing and he's just kind of playing through the pain and just kind of managing it, I just don't see Chicago beating Boston. Where if Jimmy was good and he was ready to go, again, I would probably still take Boston, but man, I would not be surprised at all if Miami ended up pulling out that win. I don't think anyone would be. But it's just, I don't know, it's an interesting thing. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. Pass the question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? Do you think that, yes, look, Atlanta, you got to tear it down. Would you trade Trey? Would you trade DeJounte? Would you trade both? Would you keep both? Try to maybe get some other pieces? What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on Miami and Chicago? Who do you think wins that game? What do you think of the Caruso and Jimmy injuries? Again, that sucks. It's tough. But anyway, again, how you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. So I enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.